Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are going to demystify the difference between titanium white and transparent mixing white, or zinc white, and between Mars Black and Ivory Black. If you're following along with me, you might also want some primary colors, such as primary red, primary blue, and primary yellow that you can experiment with. I also painted up a black and white canvas to experiment on and used a marker to identify what mixtures I had put where on the canvas. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials that I'm using today, and let's get started. Alright, so to demonstrate the difference between the two blacks and the two whites, I've divided my canvas into a black half and a white half. And I'm going to start by laying out my colors directly onto the canvas. And so this is the transparent mixing white. There's been a lot of confusion, people saying they absolutely cannot find this. And I think that you're probably looking for it in basics. And they actually don't make it in basics. You have to get it in the heavy body. In other brands, it might be an artist grade heavy body paint like this. It might be found in a student grade paint. You might find it under the name just mixing white, not transparent mixing white. And it might also be called zinc white. So if you find zinc white and you can't find transparent mixing white, it's essentially the same thing. So zinc white will work in place of transparent mixing white. Each company calls things a little bit different. And then we have titanium white. Now, what makes these two paints different is the pigment powder that is used to create it. The pigment powder in titanium white is kind of chalky. So it's going to give a really opaque look. This one is not quite so chalky. In fact, if you look on the back, a lot of times the paint will tell you what it's made of. And on the back of this one right here, it says transparent. It's got the light fastness information. And then it says pigment, zinc white. So this is made with zinc, just like zinc white in other brands. On the titanium white, that information is found right here, and it says that the pigment is titanium dioxide. So that's a very chalky pigment where this one isn't. So we'll take a little bit of this and we'll lay it out on the black side so that you can see it. So I'm going to label that TMP for transparent mixing paint, I guess. I don't know where the P came from. Should be a W. I can't brain and paint. And right there we've got our titanium. And we're gonna say TW for titanium white. Let's just cross this out and say transparent mixing white. There. Don't look at my mistake. So I don't know if you can tell in the camera, but they do actually look just a little bit different. When they're side by side like that, to me, the titanium white looks like a slightly warmer white than the transparent mixing white. This looks very cool, almost a slightly bluish hue. Now I have Mars Black and Ivory Black. And the Mars Black says that the pigment is synthetic black iron oxide. On the Ivory Black, it says amorphous carbon. So let's lay a little of these out, and I'll label them properly this time. So this is Ivory Black, so we'll say IB. This is Mars Black, so we'll say MB. Now again, it's probably impossible for you to tell in the camera, but when you look at these, you can tell a difference. The Mars Black almost seems to be a little bit glossier, and it's more of a deep black. Where the Ivory Black, it's not quite as glossy, it's not matte. It's a much softer black. So let's do a basic test and see the difference. So I'm gonna pull some titanium white out and make a line here under it. And it's quite opaque. Let's get some transparent mixing white. And see, it's much softer. You can see through it more. And again, I do feel like this looks warmer than this. This looks much cooler. Let's get some Mars Black. And that's quite a stark black, quite opaque. some Ivory Black, much more transparent. Another difference that we'll see between these two blacks as we go is that Mars Black is a much cooler black. It leans toward blue, where Ivory Black is much warmer and it tends to lean toward red. So here's a fun experiment that will really get you started toward understanding the difference in the four colors here. Let's start with Mars Black. So I'm gonna pick up just a little bit, not a ton, but what I'm gonna do is come over to my titanium white and pick up an equal amount. So I've got an equal amount of paint on each side. Let's mix it over here and see what kind of a gray we get. So it's pretty dark gray. It's not black, but it's definitely gray. Now let's take some Ivory Black, the same amount as we just used of the Mars Black, and the same amount of titanium white. I'm gonna try not to get any of that Mars Black in here. See the difference in there? Not only is it a much lighter gray, it's slightly warmer, and it's even a little bit transparent. I can see the white of the canvas through the paint, where I can't really see that here, except in some of these thin spots. So let's label these so that we remember. Now let's see what happens if we take an even amount of mixing white and an even amount of Mars Black. And we'll label that. Now that is much darker. It's a lot darker than this with the titanium, and it's very slightly transparent. Let's see what happens now when we mix it with Ivory Black. So transparent mixing white and Ivory Black. So it's pretty close to the titanium and Ivory Black. It might be just ever so slightly darker, but look how transparent it is. Because both the transparent mixing white and Ivory Black are very transparent colors. So you can see a lot of the white through it. And very quickly, I'm gonna run through and do those exact same tests on the black side so that we can see the difference with the black showing through versus the white showing through. All right, now on the side with the black paint, we can actually see a little bit more of the differences than we can on the side with the white paint. If you look at this one, for example, with the Ivory Black and the titanium white, this looks like a much warmer gray than this one. It's lighter, yes, but it's ever so slightly warm, and that's because the Ivory Black, like I said, it leans towards red. And I think the titanium white is slightly warm too. Notice this one here, even though they're pretty close to the same lightness, this one looks a little bit cooler than this one does. And I think that's because the transparent mixing white tends to be a little bit cooler of a color than the titanium white. So really you would pick which color you want out of the four based on what it is that you're doing. If you want some transparency and you are using lighter colors, then I would absolutely go with the transparent mixing white. If you're using darker colors, but you want to maintain some transparency and you don't want the black to overpower things like Mars Black can, then you'd want to use Ivory Black. So let's see what these do when you add them to colors, and we'll compare it to what happens with titanium white and Mars Black as well. So I have this old plate from my last video because I'm still out of plates, and we'll lay out some yellow. This is primary blue and primary red. So let's see what happens when we mix it with any of these colors here. Let's start with titanium white. So I'm gonna grab an equal amount of titanium white, and we just get a nice pale yellow. We'll mark this as a titanium white column. And predictably we get a very soft pink. And we get a soft pastel blue. Now let's see what happens with transparent mixing white. It's still quite bright, and it doesn't have that pastel chalky look to it as the one with titanium white does. I just want to lay it there so that you can see the difference. So it lightened the red, but it didn't make it quite so pastel-y pink. And also notice how much more transparent it made it over here. And again with the blue, it definitely lightened it, but kept it very transparent. Let's see what happens with black. And it's almost completely gone, the yellow. Instead, we get a really kind of strange green. And it almost turns it a strange burgundy color. All right, let's see what ivory does to all of them. And as you can see, the yellow was not immediately overpowered. It still turned a little bit green, but it's way more yellow than this one over here. It's also very, very transparent because the yellow and the black both are transparent. Just kind of really muted the colors. Actually, let's do one more experiment since we have room up here. We know what the black and the white do here, but let's test it out on the black so that we can really see the transparency. Let's do it with the ivory first. Let's actually just do the reds on here. That'll give you a good idea of the transparency that the transparent mixing white adds versus the titanium white. Much more chalky, much more pastel. So a lot of times people don't have the transparent mixing white, and I've used it in several videos to get a nice transparent area, like in the blue Christmas, we used it on the Christmas ornaments. And I had people asking if they could use gloss medium or glazing medium to get the same effect. And so I'm going to show you the difference between transparent mixing white on its own, which you can see here, and titanium white with glazing medium. Grab some white and mix it in here. So here is titanium white right next to the transparent mixing white with the glazing medium. It is pretty similar, so I would say if you absolutely don't have the transparent mixing white, you can use it. I think I added just a little bit much medium in there. I feel like it is a little more chalky looking, but notice, I think you can tell that in the camera when they're directly side by side like that, how the transparent mixing white looks so much cooler and the titanium white looks so much warmer. And now that those colors that I added the white to are dry, you can see a little bit more of a difference between them, especially in the red. I feel like it's much more of a true red compared to this, which is much more of a pastel pink. So I hope this was incredibly helpful information for you, and I hope you now understand the difference between titanium white and transparent mixing white or zinc white, and Mars black and ivory black. Now there are other versions of white and black that you may come across. These are the only two different ones that I've ever used, but I encourage you to pick one up and test it out. Do something really similar to what we did here and try and see if you can figure out what the difference is between the two different colors. If this video is helpful to you, make sure you give it a thumbs up and maybe share it with a friend who you think would like it as well. Make sure to check out the video description below for a list of the materials I used, as well as links to where you can find me all over the internet. If you haven't yet subscribed, please make sure that you do so that you can paint with me every week and occasionally get helpful videos like this. Thank you as always for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.